Tell me something, my friend. You ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
Welcome to Trekosophy, the Star Trek philosophy podcast. Joining me this evening is our fearless leader. His Taylor can let out a seam and start 3 wars all in a single afternoon. It's Ben McLean.
Death and fashion.
You're an undertaker. Great. Sorry. Also joining us, our northern spook, who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who can make you a holographic reproduction, Brendan Kirby.
Good evening.
And once again, our technical guru, when he authenticates a Cardassian data rod, it stays authenticated. It's Chris McGee.
Genuine optolithic data rod since 2347.
And I am Bill Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt. And tonight, we're going to dance with the devil in the pale moonlight.
He knows where that line is from.
Now I do, or at least I think I do. Come to think of it, what I know of it is that Jack Nicholson said it in the Batman movie.
That's exactly where they got it from. The writers, anyway.
So, wait, but didn't the Batman movie get it from some other poem somewhere?
I believe so. Yeah, the episode was a reference to the phrase, "Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?" from the film Batman. But it doesn't go back any farther than that.
Well, we should put out a challenge to our listeners or whatever, that if anyone ever finds out what that is, they should tell us, and then we will mention it in a future episode. We're talking about In the Pale Moonlight tonight, which is one of the deepest, darkest DS9 episodes with lots of things about it that start with the letter D. And
why doesn't somebody throw down a synopsis, or is that what you were about to do, Ben?
well, actually, you know what? I need to let some other people talk. So
Does anyone want to give us a brief summary for it?
I want to make one of you people do it.
All right, well, according to Memory Alpha, the synopsis is, at the end of his frustration over the losses the Federation is taking in the Dominion War, Sisko enlists Garrick's help to persuade the Romulans to join the Federation against the Dominion. Sisko soon learns that, to save the Federation, he may have to abandon the values it stands for. Dun dun dun.
Well said. There were some ethical concerns, though.
Yeah, a lot of them. This episode seems to illustrate, the whole idea of the slippery slope. There's a great scene in the movie Air Force One where Harrison Ford is playing the president, and he yells into the phone, basically, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. Once you start the process of compromise, then it's very hard to stop or even know where to stop.
Let's lay out what he did. What Sisko did that was ethically questionable. Let's not make a judgment just yet, but let's say,
well, of course,
what did he do that was ethically questionable?
Yeah.
That any good person would stop and say, was that right? And there was, he enlisted the help of Mr. Garrick.
Yeah.
And that was maybe step 1. I know, Ben, you had a couple of different steps, but
I had 8 steps, and enlisting Garrick's help is step 3.
As far as the whole slippery slope thing goes, I'm not sure how much it is, because it does seem to jump around, and a lot of it is almost disconnected. It's not so much a slippery slope. He does one bad thing, then another bad thing. It's all these little individual things by themselves are iffy, but they're okay. And it's not really like, well, you already did that, you may as well do this. It's all part of, I don't know, it was just...
Some of them were connected, some not.
Yeah, when you see it listed out like this, it just starts looking.
Yeah, well, I tried to keep them though, at least in chronological order. I'm trying to not make any moral judgments in how I wrote this list down. I'm just trying to list the decisions in chronological order. And at least in chronological order, he decided to enlist Garrick's help in the wardroom, but he agreed to falsify evidence in Garrick's shop in a later scene.
The first decision Cisco made was to bring the Romulans into the war. That was in the teaser before the credits even rolled.
Right.
What
But he
he
uses
attempted to do
deceit to
that was he basically had a little talk with, I think it was with the Dax, to say, well, you know what, there probably is evidence that suggests that once the war with the Federation is over, the Dominion are going to attack the Romulans. We just need to go get it. We need to find it and show it to the Romulans. And so that's when he went to Garrick and said, hey, can you use your contacts? And Garrick said, I have to call in all my contacts, all my favors, in order to get that. And then what happens the next day? Oh, well, all of his contacts are now dead. That's when they decide, well, Garrick basically plants the idea in Cisco's head. Well, I hope you're not going to give up that quickly. And that's when he says, I can provide false evidence that will look genuine.
In all honesty, I think we ought to recognize that most major powers usually have plans for taking down most other major powers somewhere in their military.
Yeah, that's true. The Romulans shouldn't have been shocked by that. Although I think the issue is that on the holographic recording, that was the key moment of the episode, that on the holographic recording, the Dominion were actively planning an imminent invasion. It wasn't just a speculation, okay, well, if we have to go to war, this is what it's going to look like.
Right,
They were planning, there was actually something in the works where they were going to go forward with it.
Okay, so that's the element that Cisco lied about. Not just they're planning it, but that it's imminent.
Right, it's part 1, destroy the Federation. Part 2, destroy the Romulans. That was the big lie.
Well, I think they were planning on doing it while they were still going to war with the Federation. Like there was a short time frame. That's what the concern.
Right. But I mean, the thing is, though, was it really a lie? I mean,
well, I think it certainly was. I mean, he had to hire a guy to forge the data rod. I'd say that's a lie.
That's the definition of a lie.
No, but if you think about it, though. No, he only made up the actual evidence, but what the Dominion was planning, he was telling the truth about what the Dominion was planning.
We don't know that. We never saw any real evidence.
I think we could assume that the Dominion
that you're making an assumption, though.
Yeah, but I think it's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah,
that the Dominion was planning to pretty much conquer all sentient life in the end.
Well, I think I might disagree with something you said earlier. I think this is entirely relevant as to whether or not it was believable that the Dominion actually would attempt to conquer Romulus in the future. I think you've got to have that conversation if you're going to discuss the ethics of what Cisco was doing. Because how much is he really manufacturing? He might not. I mean, it's as Bill said. He might be manufacturing evidence for something that's true.
But we don't know that, and he doesn't know that.
Here's my ethical core with what he did. I hate to take us off that topic. My quarrel is that quote, which I ripped this from memory alpha. I could never remember it verbatim. People are dying out there every day.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
entire worlds are struggling with their freedom. And here I am still worrying about the finer points of morality. And so what Cisco does is he sacrifices his spiritual health, his soul, morality, for a political affair. Politics, the governance of things temporal, has priority in his life over spiritual matters, which I view as eternal. the lesser is put in a higher place above the greater. And that is, as I'm sure Ben could tell you, the antithesis of Socrates, where
Well,
he's talking
it's
about a
Augustine's
well-ordered
definition
soul.
of evil, right?
Well, disordered love. But, I mean, he's going to talk about the road to hell's paved with good intentions too. But my quarrel with the whole episode is that Sisko places politics above morality. And that's where I think he went wrong. That's the Kirby assessment of why I disagreed with what he did. Go ahead and dissect it.
The thing is, though, I mean, there's morality and then there's morality. I mean, he made a personal sacrifice, but like you were saying, people are dying out there every day. He sacrificed his personal morality for the greater good. I mean, he'd already been told. Wasn't it just a few episodes prior to this where Bashir in his collection of super geniuses said, the outcome of this war is inevitable. The Federation is going to lose.
Quite possibly.
Well,
I don't remember.
How did Ronald Reagan say it? A little intellectual elite in a far distant capital planning our lives for us better than we can do that ourselves. The little intellectual elite was Rome. The Federation totally kicked their asses. Or butts,
No.
or however you say that.
Well, that's just it. The Federation didn't. And when we go to actually talk about the war, I'll bring this up again, but that was one of the silliest, craziest endings of all time that just made absolutely no sense to me because the Federation didn't win the war. The Dominion just stopped fighting.
So Sisko's first decision was to bring Romulans into the war. Garrick tried to call in favors, found out that all his contacts were dead. So the next decision was Garrick planted the idea in Sisko, let's just manufacture that evidence ourselves.
Can we actually read the points that I wrote down for the decisions?
I think that should have been the starting point of the episode. Go ahead.
I mean,
do it.
yeah. Look,
Well, that's kind of
I
what
mean,
I'm doing here, but, you know.
Yeah, well, you're
do it.
skipping some of them, and I just really think we've got to read these. All right, there's nine decision points I've recognized in the episode in which Sisko has to make an ethical decision. The first one is the decision to bring the Romulans into the war, and that means, of course, his statement that he's ready to do whatever it takes, even though he hasn't really thought through what it might take at that point.
Yeah, that's true.
2, his decision to trust Garrick, even when Garrick says it may be a bloody business. He still trusts Garrick with the assignment. This happens in the wardroom. Decision 3 is the decision to falsify evidence. This happens in Garrick's shop. And he also makes a decision at that point to ask Starfleet Command for authorization, which you could make that sort of a side on that one. And then the fourth decision is the decision to ask Garon to pardon Grathon Tolar, who is going to be executed, who's probably done all kinds of bad stuff. Does Sisko ask what he's done? No, he just says to pardon him. So that's a moral decision. Decision 5 is the decision to provide the mimetic gel, despite knowing it could be used for any kind of illegal genetic experiment or weapon. 6, the decision to bribe Quark and not prosecute Tolar, even though Tolar has broken the law in a fairly nasty manner. Decision 7 is the decision to detain Tolar pending success or failure when he had previously promised Tolar that he would let him go as soon as he's done the job. He has no way of knowing that Garrick is going to kill Tolar.
Yeah, at this point.
So I'm not counting that being on Sisko. Decision 8, well, that's part of trusting Garrick. That was decision 2.
Exactly.
Decision 8 is the decision to let Garrick loose on the Romulan shuttle. He should have probably been suspicious at that point.
But he had made so many decisions by that point that he's figured, okay, go ahead, whatever.
Yeah, but that is a decision, even though it happened really quickly.
Yeah.
And then there's a decision 9 is the decision to not prosecute Garrick, even though Garrick has committed several murders for political reasons. I think that's all the decisions, all the decisions of Sisko. And so the question is, did he go wrong? If so, where did he go wrong?
Oh, don't forget the decision to delete that entire log.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Decision to delete the log. Sure,
Yeah,
why not?
But that's the thing. That's the Dostoevsky, crime and punishment. It's not just that you sin; it's that you try to cover it up and pretend as if you never did.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe it does make sense, and he's covering it up. This decision to cover it up.
That's part and parcel to the whole experience of sin.
Okay.
But during all of this, including bribing Quark, that was all covering stuff up.
Yeah, but keeping it covered up in the end, even once it's been murder that's been committed. I mean, covering up murder is quite different from covering up a sort of a bar fight that happens.
Well, he also engaged with Garrick. I think that's probably where it really starts to go downhill, because sure, it's pious. Bring the Romulans into the war, and what was he initially trying to convince them with? Truth. The Dominion are looking to conquer everyone and everything, and all this is pious, and sure, let's go for it. If we assume the falsehood of utter pacifism, then I think he had done everything ethically up until that point. But then he enlists Garrick, at which point, he's got all these what's the word I'm looking for? Not covert, but deceit, torture, questionable interrogations, the sort of thing we Canadians do when we suspect you're smuggling maple syrup. Like it really gets out of hand. That's where I think his.
Who got tortured?
Well, people died.
Oh, okay. I don't think anybody got tortured in this episode, as far as I'm aware.
No, but he knew that Garrick was capable of these things.
Garrick did say it was going to be a bloody business.
Exactly. Okay. And we all know what Garrick is all about.
That's right.
And Sisko says, okay, this is the sort of tactic that I want to use to bring the Romulans on board. And so when people die, there's an element of foreseeable outcome. I can't remember what the legal term for it is here in Canada. It's sort of the question I remember for it in the States. But it was foreseeable that this was going to happen. It was foreseeable that he was going to be immoral when he did this.
So you think that's where he went down that slope?
The
moment he trusted Garrick.
Politics over morality is when I thought he became unethical. Which is brilliant, because a lot of us would have done the exact same thing. But nevertheless,
that's why we look up to these captains,
See, I'd be willing to argue that Sisko did not do anything unethical.
Let's have it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's go.
I mean, each item on the list by itself is reasonable. First, the Federation needs more allies to win, so you need to get the Romulans. You got to convince them by whatever means necessary to join the Federation. And I mean, given the long-term history of conflict between the Romulans and the Federation, I mean, such a goal of an alliance in any type is commendable and could lead to a long-term peace in the Alpha Quadrant. So that's a good thing. So it was the right decision. Plus, if you don't bring them in, you're going to lose. And the end of the Federation would be a bad thing. So for, decision number one, to bring the Romulans in, that was the right thing to do. But Sisko is a Starfleet officer. He's not a spy. And finding secret records hidden in a clandestine military base is not something he would know anything about. So he's going to need to find somebody who does know about that sort of thing. He goes to the expert, and that's Garrick. It makes sense. It's not a moral decision one way or the other. You don't call an electrician for a plumbing problem. You call a plumber. It's just a practical decision. You got to do some spy work. You're going to call a spy.
Yeah, so... Do you think that Sisko went wrong at any point, Bill, or do you think it was really okay in the end, and he should have been able to just live with it, and it was actually all right in the end?
Yeah, it's a good thing to speed me up, because I could sit there and stammer over this for hours. Sisko never actually went wrong. Honestly, what happens is this is an example of the kind of naive idealism you'll find in the Federation. It's been mentioned in a few episodes here and there in Deep Space Nine that life in the Federation is pretty much perfect. So people in the Federation just don't understand poverty and hunger and the problems that people in the real world face. I don't think, even though Sisko knew, yeah, okay, we're going to plant some evidence. That's what we're going to do. That's all we're going to do. When Garrick says, oh, I'm going to go check out the shuttle for anything interesting, he's thinking, well, Garrick's a spy. He's going to be trying to steal some information from the computers, which is what Garrick does. He's a spy. You got to get information. When the shuttle blows up, Sisko, you can't say that Sisko should have known or should have seen it coming. Maybe he should have if he comes from a cynical, bitter world. But as a member of the Federation who's all about peaceful solutions, his mind just doesn't work like that. He doesn't think of murder as a possibility. So he really thought it was going to be a simple snatch and grab, steal some info, plant some info, have a nice day, nobody gets hurt. He honestly believed that.
I put that in as a moral decision, only because it represents a further betrayal of Romulans who are supposed to be the people you're trying to make your allies.
But
and it's not a very big decision in the grand scheme of things.
But
though.
Sisko was not the one doing the betrayal. There's only one real thing Sisko did that was questionable, and that's deciding to plant the evidence.
Well, Sisko authorized Garrick to infiltrate the shuttle in a very brief scene.
It wasn't so much authorized. It was more like Garrick said, oh, I'm just going to go have a little sneaky peek around and run off. It wasn't Sisko's idea. It wasn't Sisko's orders.
Sisko authorized it, though.
Sisko just said, don't get caught or something.
Yeah, he said, don't get caught. Don't make things worse.
That was an authorization. You see, he could have stopped Garrick. He could have ordered Worf and the other security guard to stop Garrick from doing that. But he didn't. So that was another decision. It wasn't a big decision compared to many of these others, but it was a decision.
And it was, but that's just it. It was Garrick who decided to commit murder. Garrick did all the lying, the cheating.
Yeah, I'm not blaming Sisko for the murder, but he did make a decision there.
I blame Sisko for the murder. Bill, can I take issue with something you said?
Yeah.
Surely you wouldn't mind. You're a good philosopher. You don't mind that sort of thing, do you?
Well, I'm a philosopher. I'm not a very good one, but okay.
Okay, well, you're a mediocre philosopher.
There you go.
You said Sisko's mentality was such that, I'm sure I'm not going to be quoting you verbatim, but the end of the Federation would be a bad thing.
Right.
And therein lies our disagreement.
And
sure. Well, not even that much. It's the concept that the political authority changing hands is of greater significance than morality. I mean, our country's greatest threats right now are economic. They're not really foreign policy. And you could strengthen the economy by just killing off disabled people, but you don't do it because it's grossly immoral. It's to sacrifice morality in favor of politics. That's the assumption where I think we differ. Can you sacrifice morality in favor of politics? I'm arguing no here.
I think what it is while the Federation is a political entity, it is also something of a philosophical ideal. It's the embodiment of a concept, the ultimate embodiment of peace and equality and tolerance and whatever else you want to include. The Federation is as close to humans ever came to utopia.
Well, I'm probably quite ignorant of your country's history and its ideals, but I think it's something similar to the United States. And still placing the United States' well-being or the Canadian well-being or what have you, as admirable as your country's ideals are, to place that well-being over morality and ethics, I just find, to me, that's the thing that I'm attacking. You
Okay.
place the temporal above the eternal.
I would ask, what is it that makes one government being in charge versus another better if it isn't morality?
Well, I don't think a strong economy is necessarily moral or immoral.
Well, what I'm saying is the real difference between the Federation and the Dominion isn't fiscal policy. It's foreign and social policy that make the Federation and the Dominion different.
Well, that's another episode.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the
But
monster
my
would
point
disagree.
is, though, that it's morality by which we judge what makes governments good or bad. We can't just ditch morality in order to keep, what is our principle which makes us prefer the Federation if we don't prefer the Federation for being more of a moral system than the Dominion? If we're going to give up on the Federation ideals in order to defend the Federation, then we're giving away our cake and starving to death.
But
Well,
that's
it's
the
more
thing.
like we're giving up our seat at the table. I mean, Cisco was not out to destroy the Federation to save the Federation. He was deciding to basically sacrifice himself. He's determined to end up being a sinner and going to hell in order to assure that all these other people can get into heaven.
Yeah. You know who would love this episode? Machiavelli. This episode has got Machiavelli and the Prince written all over it, don't you think?
Well, you have to
Sure.
explain who Machiavelli is.
Yeah, let's
Well,
step it up, young
Brandon
Benjamin.
might be able to do a better job than I. Do you think you could, Brandon, or do you want me to try?
Or do we even need to? Is that still on topic?
I think if we're going to do In the Pale Moonlight, we can't get through it without at least
Okay,
mentioning
just thought I'd
Machiavelli.
ask.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead, Ben.
I'll try.
I'll do it if you want. If you
I'm
want,
not
I'll-
very solid on the history of it, is my real concern. I can't even tell you what century Machiavelli is from.
I can give you the Cliff Notes version of what Machiavelli is.
Go for it, Bill.
Machiavelli was this Italian dude, and I think it was like the 16th or 17th centuries. No, it was before that. It was like
Yeah, I think it was older than that.
Columbus days, 1400s, 1500s, thereabouts.
Somewhere like that.
Yeah, and he grew up in Italy, in one of the Italian city-states. If you do any of the study of the art of the period or whatever, they talk about these families who have like the strong political influence, the Borgias, the whatever. Politics was a cutthroat business in his day, and he wrote this political manifesto called The Prince, which was about getting power, keeping power, and running a nation. It didn't deal so much with the morality of it as it did the practicality of it. I think you could say he had sort of a utilitarian outlook on things.
Well, you
I
could
don't know
say
if I'd
that
go that
sort
far.
of. I couldn't go that far either,
But-
though. Yeah.
He put pragmatism over morality. Morality
That's
was a question that became suspended, all in favor of getting things done. And that's the sin. That's the August, because I am Augustinian. I did write
Right.
a book on the city of God.
Right.
It's,
I think we. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was going to say, didn't we cover Augustine earlier?
If we did, I don't remember it, and I probably would have asked for a definition of who Augustine is as well.
Well, I was going to bring up a point about Augustine.
Okay.
Maybe I've already done it. But with Machiavelli, Cisco left Augustinian morality, i.e., Christian morality,
Okay.
and became, surely the audience has heard of Christ, and he became Machiavellian because he put that which is practical over that which is moral.
Yeah, I think some definitions are in order for further definitions. First of all, the reason we said Augustinian
Sure.
instead of just Christian is because Augustinian famously defined evil as preferring the lesser good over the greater good. And by the greater good, Augustine did not mean the utilitarian greater good. He meant the right thing to do. Putting your desires over the right thing to do is the more sort of thing he meant by preferring the lesser.
That's right.
We desire the wrong things usually for good reasons, for the good that is in them. But the good that is in the wrong thing is never as great as the good that is in the right thing. So the definition of evil, according to Augustine, is to prefer the lesser good over the greater good. And so according to Augustine, and we shouldn't confuse Augustine with the utilitarians, according to Augustine, what Sisko was doing here was wrong because he was putting politics and his desire to win in a war over morality, over right and wrong. Now, Machiavelli comes along and says, you know what? Augustinian ethics don't work. I've watched all kinds of horrible, awful things happen in my life, and I have noticed a few things. This is Machiavelli speaking here. I have noticed that unarmed prophets fail, armed prophets succeed. If you want to win, and by winning, Machiavelli would mean getting power and maintaining power, then I will show you how to do it. And how to do it is not by worrying about what is the right thing. How to do it is by worrying about how to win. So, where Plato would say the goal of politics is virtue, Machiavelli says politics is the art of compromise. So that's why we're bringing up Machiavelli here, because this episode sort of has Machiavelli written all over it.
I think to simplify it a little bit, it might be good to say it's sort of a question of whether the ends justifies the means. And Machiavelli was a dude that said the ends justify the means, and some people will say no. Even if you lose, even if everything is destroyed, don't do something bad, even if doing something bad will prevent other bad things from happening. It's a weird kind of the means justify the end. It doesn't matter if you lose as long as you play fair, as opposed to get in office and then you can do things your way and make the galaxy better.
Yeah, well, I think our different views here are actually pretty well summed up and expressed by the different ethical systems we brought up in the time travel episode. And so I think it might be a good idea for each of us to try to apply each of those systems to In the Pale Moonlight.
Okay, fair enough.
There were 4 systems, if you recall. They were deontology or Kantian ethics, utilitarianism straight, utilitarianism rule-based, and social contract theory. There's 4 of us, so each of us should try and do one of them if we can remember.
Dibs on utilitarianism. Straight.
All right, well, since you've taken the cool part of utilitarianism,
So sorry.
I'll take rule-based utilitarianism.
All right, fair enough. That worked out well. Go for it, Ben.
I'm going to pick social contract.
Okay.
Even though I have no idea how to apply it in this situation.
That leaves Kantianism for Kirby.
Well, I'll actually.
The ontology.
Well, okay. How about this? Let's scrap social contract this time, and let's do natural law for Kirby, and I'll do deontology or Kantian ethics.
Okay, so what happens to social contract theory?
It gets ditched this time.
It deserves to get ditched.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
it's very closely related with natural law theory.
Okay. Has to do something with the particular society that you're in or something.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go with Chris. Can you go first then?
All right, so utilitarianism, obviously, to determine who the greatest amount of utility that would be benefited by Sisko's decision. Well, let's see. On the one hand, this war could drag out, millions upon millions of people could die. And then, of course, at the end, without any help from the Romulans, Federation and Klingons get wiped out. At the beginning of the episode, it looks pretty bleak. Whereas if they do bring the Romulans in, well, millions of people will be saved, and the evil empire, quote unquote, of the Dominion will be crushed. Sounds to me like utilitarianism. I don't know how many people make up the Dominion in terms of sheer numbers, but I would think that the combined forces of the Federation, Klingons, and Romulans would probably outnumber the Dominion. So they would receive the most utility if that decision were followed. So utilitarianism, in my opinion at least, would say absolutely it was all worth it. The ends definitely justify the means. Do it, Cisco.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you factor in that the Dominion
It's
citizens
mostly made up of
probably,
clones. But
yeah, the Dominion citizens probably wouldn't benefit from a Dominion victory either. Only the founders would benefit from a Dominion victory,
yeah,
and then
but looking
only.
at all the utility, though,
Well, not a lot of people.
which is the bad thing about utilitarianism. It just looks at sheer numbers and doesn't care about who those numbers belong to.
There were a lot of Dominion citizens that learned to thrive under Dominion rule, and that's I don't want to be the podcast anus here, but I've really got to take issue here. Is that does utilitarianism promote the Dominion over the Federation? What makes the Dominion evil? Well, they once introduced a plague to these people in season 3 to bring them down. So did the Federation in season 7.
Hold on though. When we're talking about utilitarianism, we have to sort of think in terms of sort of happiness being handed out. And who hands out more happiness, the Federation or the Dominion?
Well,
I think
a lot
the
of people
Federation.
learn to be happy under the Dominion.
I think the Federation
The
hands out.
Federation, are they totalitarian dictators? The Maquis would answer yes. People on Risa would answer no.
I don't think the Maquis
Well,
would even say that.
Hanak's people would answer the Dominion are quite generous in their distribution of happiness, whereas the people who receive the plague would answer no. So
Now, wait a minute. You said you didn't say that the Dominion made them happy. You said some people learn to be happy. So the Dominion's impact isn't necessarily a beneficial one. It's just there were some races who were clever or lucky enough to end up carving out a little niche for themselves. And because of that, they're not going to be unhappy if the Dominion goes away. They'll probably be happier because they had to learn how to be happy under the Dominion.
Well, you sort of
Yeah,
have to learn how to be happy under the Federation, but not in the same way.
It's a little bit
well, I don't know. A lot of people might have to learn how to be happy under the Federation too.
Well, from Sisko's perspective as a Starfleet officer, there is no doubt in his mind that people are happier in general under the Federation than they are under the Dominion. And I think, at least for the sake of argument, for analyzing Sisko's actions, we pretty much have to accept that assumption. Otherwise, we're going to be going on about the whole Dominion War instead of about In the Pale Moonlight.
So, Bill,
So-
rule-based utilitarianism.
All right, rule-based utilitarianism doesn't look at a specific act or event. It looks at a rule for covering such a situation. Like, in general, is it a good idea to do such and such? In general, would it benefit or harm more to do something? Did I get that roughly right? Is that pretty much the gist of it in 10 seconds?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. For 10 seconds, you did really, really good.
I think under rule-based utilitarianism, what Sisko did... Ooh, this is a toughie.
Yeah.
Basically, murdering a diplomat to help expand a nation's alliances and increase alliances and foster diplomacy through murder of a diplomat.
Well, here's like a hint. What is it okay to do during a war?
It's okay to kill.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something a rule-based utilitarianism would say, is that it's okay to kill during a war.
But it's not okay to kill guys on your side. That kind of defeats the purpose. If you shoot your own army, they call it friendly fire, but it's not really very friendly, And that's the thing. I mean, I think under rule-based utilitarianism, if it's just, I think this is a little bit tougher. If you made it a rule that apply, I mean, are you allowed to kill a diplomat to make an alliance happen? I would say if that was how you were phrasing it, then rule-based utilitarianism might be okay with it. But are you allowed to murder to get a benefit for a great population? I don't think rule-based utilitarianism would go for that, because if everybody was allowed to kill somebody to make things better for everybody else, there'd be nobody alive for things to be better for.
Right. So if we take Sisko having the authorization from Starfleet Command that he in fact gets as a representative of the Federation, and therefore sort of as authorized by the rule maker, then it's okay with rule-based utilitarianism, but not otherwise, it seems like. Is that where you'd arrive at?
I think so, yeah. If it's, specifically related to diplomat on diplomat violence. I think, but under rule-based utilitarianism, if it's diplomatic violence versus diplomat against a diplomat violence, then yeah, the rule's acceptable. But I don't think rule-based utilitarianism would support murder to forge alliances. Okay. But it would support murder for diplomatic purposes.
So
all right,
the conclusion from rule-based utilitarianism is maybe in the end.
Yeah.
Isn't that always the conclusion from rule-based utilitarianism?
No,
yeah,
I don't think so.
I think it's all in how you structure the rule. That's the thing about rule-based utilitarianism.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so screwy.
We may have to just toss that one out or something in the future. I don't know.
That was no. We got a clear answer in the time travel episode, and the answer was no.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ben.
So,
your turn.
My turn. It's deontology time. You can't
say a bit about
no. What?
Say a bit about what deontology is.
Yeah, well,
we've already identified what deontology is back in the time travel episode. If you missed it, go back and listen to that. Then come back here. Okay.
Yeah, and also you can't touch this. No. Okay,
that's
so
not how his name was pronounced, by the way.
Everyone pronounces it differently, and Kant is what I got.
I asked.
How his name is actually pronounced?
I asked Siri, "What's the meaning of life?" and she said, "I can't answer that." K-A.
Oh God.
I'll tell you how his name is actually pronounced.
What?
I've asked Germans about this too. How do you pronounce his name?
And then what did they say? They can't tell you.
You'll have to bleep it out.
Ah.
Oh. Well, I'm going to keep pronouncing it the way I just did in that case. Thank you very much.
Does anybody want to bet that Kant used to say, you know what, just call me Emmanuel?
Well, then he would have been getting confused with Jesus all the time, and that would have been a problem. Anyway.
All right. Deontology.
Yeah. Deontology pretty much says, you know what, if it's not okay for everybody, then don't do it. And very, very clearly, what Sisko did was not okay for everybody to do.
That's right.
So Kant says no. Next system.
Okay. Next system. Kirby.
Natural law. Well, I've already sort of articulated where I'm coming from. I mean, I can do it again.
Please do, because I don't recall what that was.
Darn it. Well, now, natural law is the concept whereby you have innate speculative principles and you apply them to a particular situation through what? That magical word, reason, logic. If P then Q. I shouldn't take something that doesn't belong to me. That particular thing doesn't belong to me, therefore I shouldn't take it. Natural law. You've just made a rational deduction using your natural innate moral principles.
So it's the Vulcan philosophy.
What was that? What was that?
I said, so that's the Vulcan philosophy then, since it's all about logic.
Well, I did write a book on the subject, and
Okay. We'll get to that eventually.
well, we will.
Actually, natural laws and Earth philosophy, really. I mean,
Well, Vulcans are an Earth creation too, and
yeah,
the consequence is such that if they do value logic,
yeah.
then you've got to have.
Just you need to say something like about how. Well, I don't know. The Vulcans often seem to be utilitarians, but that's for the Vulcan episode. So sorry.
Continue, Kirby.
Sorry.
Here I go. The whole umbrage of natural law theorists that I've read. Ben might disagree with this because he's read a lot of the modern natural law theorists, but the ancient medievals are going to talk about how there is a natural order and a natural progression for the way things ought to be, and one of those is that the greater should rule the lesser. And however this works itself out politically, and however we want to debate the Dominion War, let's at the very least apply this to our own personal lives, and confess that eternal principles should rule temporal principles, and therefore politics should not usurp eternal ethical values. And
Sure.
the takeaway is that Sisko should not have allowed his eternal soul to have been corrupted for the sake of politics.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I might give the a little bit more what you call modern, but would be considered classic by this point. But yeah, modern thinkers like John Locke would have to say on this from a natural law perspective, because John Locke was a big natural law theorist. He invented this thing you might have heard of called America, and he
I've
would
heard of
say,
America.
yeah, and he would say that the greater principle should rule over the lesser principle, but would object very strongly to trying to transcribe that into like greater persons ruling over lesser persons, because he had this whole all men are created equal notion, which is, a little novel and out of the ordinary, at least historically.
Yeah, sure, he had some stupid views about creation, but Locke is also going to talk a lot about private property.
Yeah.
And
okay.
what Sisko is trying to defend was his to defend.
Yeah, but
would Locke have supported the Dominion War? I think you're on thin ice there.
Locke would have supported the Dominion War, but Locke is usually writing about government.
Is this taking us away, though, from...
Yeah, Locke is usually writing about government, and he is not always writing about the same sort of thing. But my only point there was to try to help dispel the negative connotations that natural law theory can have for a lot of people when they just hear that, and then they go immediately to divine right of kings and racism and all of that. And I'm just saying that principle by itself does not take us all that direction. Because if it did, then we could very easily argue that natural law theory would basically support the Dominion. And
maybe it would. I'm glad you brought that up, though. There should be a debate.
Well, how about we leave it on a cliffhanger here, then?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up.
We've kind of reached the end here. Anyway, we want to close out that particular thought, and then we can pick it up next time?
Wait, we should go over real quick what are we going to do in part 2, because we did plan to have this be a 2-part thing. So I think we've done pretty well in that we've gone over what all 4 ethical systems say, and the answers were, as I recall, utilitarianism, yes. Rule-based utilitarianism, maybe. Kant, no. Natural law, no. So that's how many, just because it's a number doesn't make it right.
Yeah,
One valid argument is all you need to make something right, but we ended up with 1 undecided, 2 against, and 1 for from the ethical systems we examined. All right.
Which is funny is if you're going to use the vote tally like that to count it, you're going to use utilitarianism to apply to all systems to determine
right.
whether the outcome was good or bad.
Looking
But
at the
since
sheer numbers.
utilitarianism says yes, it was good, you can't use utilitarianism to judge.
Paradox. Ah!
Well, that's not I gave the warning not to use it as a conclusion,
Yeah.
but it's just interesting to see, how much consensus there might be. And one of these days, we might finally come across a case where they all agree. And if they all agree, and we haven't left any really obvious ones out, then we're doing pretty good.
All right. So what?
Anyway, so we took care of that. We got other things left in the episodes to talk about. We're going over the what we personally think, especially Bill and Chris, who didn't go over it as much as Brandon and I. We're going to talk about the whole idea of in time of war, the law falls silent, which also was quoted in DS9 at another point. But what is it that's okay during wartime that might not be okay normally, if anything? And our personal views on that, because we already exhausted the 4 ethical systems, or we didn't exhaust them, but we went over them. Was Cisco really an accessory to murder in a legal sense and in a moral sense? What about the whole biomimetic gel and what bioethics has to do with this? Is it okay to lie to your allies? And aside from being wrong, is it even a good strategy? Are there parallels in real world history for In the Pale Moonlight? And if Cisco hadn't gotten away with it, then what would have happened? So we got a lot more ground to cover. And this is one of the most interesting episodes in Star Trek. And hopefully we'll make it one of the best episodes of Trekosophy. So tune in next week.
Well said.
Take us out, Bill.
Thank you for listening. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Email us at trekosophy@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook page. I already said that, didn't I? Oh boy. Yeah, we should not drink when we do this show.
Speak for yourself,
I thought you were.
But what we should do, gentlemen, is we should close out this show the same way Cisco closed out his. Raise your glass. We are making a toast to the good guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And this is the Trekosophy crew saying thank you and good night. And computer, delete last log entry. And also joining us in tonight's episode, that particular guest who has all the answers, it's Mr. Google.
Ben, we're going to have to arm wrestle.
Another love like mine.
So
Looking it up right
they
now?
look into where all the bootlegged maple syrup comes from, right?
Canadian Security Intelligence Service. They specialize in bootlegged maple syrup. You're right. Wow.
We may actually gain
Nice.
at least a few more followers. Just
Wait.
Or
Drinking is one
listeners.
thing, but we got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, that does sound like somebody's. When we talk about Canadian snow, that wasn't what we had in mind.
Well, on that note, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Oh boy, one of these days we're gonna have to do a drinking game. Every time somebody says a specific thing, everybody takes a shot. Of course, with this group, that means the show is gonna last all of like 5 minutes. I think so. Yeah, if it's specifically related to diplomat on diplomat violence.
I'm sorry, I just got that into my head. Hot diplomat on diplomat violence.
Sunday, UN deathmatch. Yeah, sorry.
Gandhi
Although-
versus Martin Luther King in a battle to the death.
What did you say about Kirk? Them fighting words.
If it's not on Google, it just doesn't exist.
I think it's supposed to be whiskey, but, you know, when you start getting into weird brands like that, I'm not entirely sure what it is. Some hobo gave it to me because he didn't want it.
Scruffy from Futurama should receive a whole episode from this.
What?
We're making all these jokes now, but remember, the Canadians have already massed 90% of their population along the U.S. border. If they decide to invade, they've got a head start.
So stuff actually has happened in Canada.
Yeah,
What?
in my head, I'm Charlton Heston, and on tape, I'm actually Steve Buscemi. So
For 10 seconds, you did really, really good.
it's like when you're watching a movie, right? And you see this British actor, and you're left wondering, is he gay or is he just British?
I try to sound like Orson Welles, and I end up sounding like Marge Simpson.
And also joining us, he's not Catholic, he's just Canadian. It's Brandon Kirby.
That'll be great.
Yeah, we shouldn't say stoned on